And as we try to address some of these challenges, as we try to come up with solutions, there is need for partnership and collaborations with other stakeholders, both development and non-development organizations. And we also need to have structures in place, policy structures, and an enabled environment for us to be able to undertake some of these proposed activities. And besides that, as we try to encourage, our farmers to diversify production. And yesterday, a member, of course, presented on a participant on sorghum. We had cassava and many other crops. So these are some of the crops that can adapt to some climatic conditions, especially in the ASAL areas, where we know that rainfall is a problem, and because of the limited rainfall, production of some of the crops are really not optimal, and therefore there is need for these farmers to diversify into other crops if they want to enhance their food safety. And that was just the background information. And what was I trying to unearth as I tried to explore more on cassava commercialization? So first and foremost, I wanted to understand more on the outlook of cassava commercialization in Nigeria and Kenya, because from my study, the findings were that in Kenya, commercialization is a bit limited, commercialization of cassava. But then from literature, Nigeria, there are better placed in terms of production, in terms of commercialization, and they have explored a number of opportunities within the cassava value chain. Secondly, I wanted to establish whether the policy interventions which meet the specific needs of the value chain actors. We know that most organizations, development organizations, the NGOs, they come up with interventions. But do these interventions, do they really engage other stakeholders, the farmers, the middlemen, the processors, as they intervene, so that at the end of the day, their needs are catered for? And thirdly, I wanted to identify and characterize some of the drivers of cassava value chain as we try to upgrade commercialization in Nigeria and Kenya. So to my methodology, I did a systematic review literature, and I was guided by the PRISMA guidelines. And I remember yesterday, Kevin Ouko also touched on PRISMA guidelines. This is a guideline, you know, as you do literature review, how can it be scientific? Such that you don't just pick words here and there and you know, reports here and there, and you patch them together. And we know that a lot of research work has been conducted. We have reports outside there. We have enormous information. But then this information needs to be organized so that people can be able to understand. So I reviewed a number of reports. I reviewed policies and legislations, and of course, other research work. And besides that, I also interacted with key informants, and I also had focus group discussions with the group representatives, extension officers, and agricultural officers, as well as other development organization partners. And how can you analyze the literature or the reviewed literature? We have a software known as Atlas TI, which is very useful when it comes to analyzing qualitative data. So that is what I use to analyze my data. And as you can see, so that figure just shows the different steps that I followed as I was trying to screen through the literature and the information. I got the information from 5 different databases, including other reports. These databases are relevant to this work, and using some key terminologies, I was guided by that to try and explore the information and narrow down to the relevant literature. Besides that, you can see I also had additional documents and reports from the government and other organizations. So this information was thoroughly screened, validated. It was not a one-person's process. After going through the databases and sorting out the information, we also had reviewers who reviewed the literature just to confirm and ascertain that indeed they are relevant to this study. So at the end of the day, I narrowed down to 26 reports. So what were the key findings of my study? From the reviewed work, it emerged that production of cassava is still low, both in Nigeria and in Kenya. However, in Nigeria, we find that production is being expanded in other regions, not only the Delta region, but other regions as well. We know that in Nigeria or West Africa, they consume a lot of cassava, and because of that, production is also higher compared to Kenya. In Kenya, production is still low, despite the interventions by the government and other organizations, because one of the ways of responding to these climate shocks is to practice smarter agriculture and exploring some of these resilient crops are being encouraged by the government and other organizations. But despite all the intervention, production is still low in Kenya. Also in Nigeria, there exists a strong partnership between development organizations and the government of Nigeria when it comes to boosting cassava production. So these organizations, they are not operating in isolation, but there's a lot of coordination and a lot of partnership, strong partnership between the government and the development organizations such as the NGOs. And there also exists a market for different cassava products. However, these markets have not been fully explored, and we found that there are other emerging markets for cassava, like the dried cassava chips and starch, which is used in industries. This is a market that has not really been explored by Nigeria and Kenya. And I know many a times when you talk about cassava, people just think of food. And as a food, perhaps it doesn't taste good, it is not that sweet. But besides the food aspect, we also need to think of other value-added products. So in Nigeria, they have a number of value-added products compared to Kenya. So there is limited diversity of cassava value-added products in Kenya. Farmers and other actors are narrow-minded. It's only about the dried cassava and the milled cassava, and that is it. They stop at that level. They have not explored other products. Then, as mentioned, there is a potential market opportunities for industrial products, not only for the local markets, but also international market. I know China, they are importing a lot of cassava starch and even chips. They are actually the largest importer of these from Nigeria. And that is a market that Kenyans can also exploit. And our industries, what do we use? Cassava can be used to make some of the byproducts used by our local industries. Then there is low-quality cassava products and high costs of processing, and also the techniques that we are using in Kenya are a bit outdated compared to Nigeria. They have moved a notch higher, and their technology is more advanced. And I think if we are to move to higher levels of commercialization, we also need to think about our technology. And inadequate support services such as infrastructure, credit facility, that one of the ways cassava can be utilized is in the feed industry. So farmers are still not aware of cassava feed utilization, especially for livestock. And there was very limited information about cassava trade in Kenya. That information is undocumented. We don't know what is happening along the borders. We know that cassava, there's some trade ongoing between Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. But in terms of the quantities being traded, in terms of the volumes and all that, that information is missing. And weak integration between the farmers and development organizations. Our farmers are not really integrated into the development organizations' visions, objectives, and what they do. Also, there is mistrust between group members, cassava group members, and partner organizations. I was making follow-ups with farmers in Siaya County, and during the discussions, it emerged that most of these organizations, they only approach groups or farmer groups to drive through their agenda, but not to meet the needs of those group members. And sometimes they go there and they tell farmers that we want you to plant this variety, and during the harvesting time, we will come and buy your output and pay you some good money. But then farmers go ahead and engage in production, and when the harvesting time gets closer, these guys take off and they disappear. So because of that, there is a mistrust. And some of these things, they are done in an informal way, without any guidance, without the involvement of agricultural officers. Limited information on the regulations about quality standards, pricing, and even the grading structures that can promote cassava commercialization. And just winding up, Chair, most of the interventions also, we noted that are only focused on production. But then if you look at the value chain, there are a number of activities that need some attention. So these organizations should also focus on some of the other nodes of the value chain, not only the upstream node, but also the downstream node. So those were just comparisons in terms of production in Kenya and in Nigeria. As you can see, in Nigeria, of course, production is higher than that of Kenya. And also, we did just a word cloud to see the number of research work that have been done, which are related to production, the storage and handling of cassava products, processing and marketing. And from that figure, you can see that most of the research work focus on production. On production, yes, that is 41%, followed by processing and then marketing. When it comes to storage and handling, there is very little, and I believe some of you can also pick up these and explore those areas. From that figure, which of course was done by the Atlas TI, you can see that in Nigeria, there are a number of byproducts compared to Kenya, ranging from fufu, tapioca, and everything. But in Kenya, we have limited products. So, to my conclusion, looking at the cassava sector for Nigeria, the commercialization is still more competitive than that of Kenya. Cassava value chains for Kenya still underdeveloped. And there's need to be done to support industrialization and internationalizations. Also, consumer preferences and demands are changing, and there's need to tailor our products to meet these needs. And various actors should be considered as we shout about commercialization of industrial products and engage in research work. And finally, these policies or development of policies are important in the areas of pricing, the quality assurance or standards and grading, so that we can strengthen the cassava commercialization and also enhance commercialization. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. for that insightful presentation. Indeed, cassava requires a bit of voice and value addition. But first, I have a question. Because last
Thank you very much, Daktari, and I can respond that it is indeed both ways. If you look at our dietary needs, I can say that we have been kind of westernized. When I was growing up, I remember we used to eat a lot of cassava and millet. It was part of the daily diet. But over time, we now started shifting to now maize flour, and we want to eat bread, and we want to eat mandazis, and many other things, to a point that now we feel that cassava is for the poor. If you eat cassava, you know, you are languishing in poverty, you people are suffering. But that is not really the idea. I agree with you that a lot of work has been done by Calro. They have developed relevant varieties for different areas. But with all those interventions, we find that the adoption of production of cassava is still low. For one, some of these varieties don't really get to the farmers, or when they are taken to the county offices.
To say there, both in terms of a comment and basically a question. The question is, how much has the government created? Not only cassava. There are a lot of indigenous foods that we are supposed to consume. But what is the level of government in terms of awareness creation? Both to the local communities and even at policy level. When you look at national television, the adverts that we see do not touch on the nutritional value of every other food that we consume. I'm sure if we did ask young people in this conference, the nutritional value of pumpkin leaves, the sweet potatoes, there are indigenous vegetables that are called managu, saga, and all that. I will tell you, majority of them do not even know how pumpkin leaves look like, leave alone the aspect of cooking. So there is a gap there. And what is the government doing in terms of empowering the officers that are supposed to go, the extension officers, to the field to disseminate the information that you have just mentioned? Mine could also reinforce what Dr. has said. At policy level, what can the government do? Because that is where the issue is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. I know that in terms of research work, so much has been done regarding some of these indigenous vegetables and indigenous crops and their nutritional value. And I know that a number of development organizations or NGOs, for instance, Self-Help Africa, Red Cross, among many others, have engaged farmers through trainings on how they can add the nutritional value, or they can enhance the nutritional value of some of these crops. But I agree with you that there is still a gap when it comes to now the policy matters and the practical issues. I really do not know whether there are policies in place, especially when we talk about these indigenous vegetables and all that. I don't know whether the government has policies in place. But what I know is that a lot of work has been done which has not really translated into practice. So there is a gap between research and practice. As pointed out by Dr. Immaculate, our keynote speaker in yesterday's presentation. And because of that, farmers or even households are really not well informed about the nutritive value of some of these crops. We are struggling to find more on our own. We get information from third-party, sources that, can you try this? This one has lots of iron. The pumpkin leaves are very good for this and that. But I don't know, in terms of documentation and also sensitizing our farmers so that they can shift their priorities, the dietary needs, to also capture some of the nutritious or nutritive vegetables and crops is still missing. The government has prioritized on major crops, and that is where the focus lies on how they can improve production of maize, production of beans, and many others. But very limited work has been done regarding the indigenous and the underutilized crops. I hope I have addressed your concern.
Thank you so much, Dr. for that wonderful presentation and very informative. I'm one person that campaigns for the indigenous foods because they are very nutritive. When you look at the cassava, it's very rich in starch and minerals. And our first presenter, Dr. Ann, she was saying like 2 million people are suffering from malnutrition from minerals. They are lacking minerals. And so my question was, in Nigeria, you said that they are tapping into this export market to China. What do you think in Kenya we can do for our farmers to tap into that opportunity? Is it to increase the quality, or what can we possibly do so that we can tap into that market? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, as you have put it, you have actually put it right, that we also need to consider the quality of our products, because if we are to be relevant and remain competitive in such kind of spaces, then the quality standards of our products must also be right. Besides that, we need people who can connect our farmers to those markets. As a smallholder farmer located in some ward in Siaya, as an individual, I cannot market my product, in China or other country. But then these farmers can be organized, and we know that group formations and organizing farmers into groups so that they can also produce in volume to be able to market or tap into those opportunities, because you cannot market a sack of cassava. For you to penetrate those markets, you also need to consider volume. So first of all, yes, the government has focused on production, how they can improve production. But then now, how they can also link our farmers to those markets. How these products can be value added, because we cannot market raw cassava. It is bulky in nature and perishable in nature. So we need to undertake some value addition for us to be able to tap into those markets. Those are just but a few of the interventions that can be done. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I will be available to interact with you, and I think we can partner with you now that you are also passionate about these crops. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please have claps. I think it's said that Dr. Esther Mwende from Fire University needs to come online. I don't know whether you can be able to locate her. But before she comes, I would beg us to have just an energizer energetic as we wait for the presentation from Dr. Esther Muindi from Pwani University. It's my humble request to Simone to Esther, are you online? Is she online?
Yes, I'm online.
Oh, okay.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know whether you are able to see my shared screen.
Yes, we can.
So I can start.
Please go on.
Thank you. All protocols observed. Good afternoon once more. My name's Esther Muindi. Just a minute, my screen is not moving. Give me a minute. Yes, my name is Esther Muindi. I'm based at Pwani University, and my area of specialization is soil and water management. I would like to share with you part of my work on the effects of tillage and liming and phosphorus fertilizer application on maize growth and yields in acid soils. I'll start by showing a picture. You can see in the picture there is a maize which is very green on your left and has a very big maize cob. Then there is another maize which has a very nice purple coloration and has a very small cob. This purple coloration is what we term as phosphorus deficiency, and is normally very common in acidic soils and also in alkaline soils. This will be the outline of my presentation. Then to start with, I'll start by giving a small background on what we mean by acidic soils and what they do to our phosphorus within the soils. Acid soils are said to be in more than 13% of our Kenyan land, and this is land which is normally along the Kenya Islands, all through from Meru to Busia. We also have some acid soils in some hotspots in the lower eastern of Ukambani and also in the coastal region, but most of the acidic soils which are problematic in our country, they are based between the eastern and the western islands, that is between Meru all the way to Busia. The problem with acidic soils is because they are normally the acidity is brought mostly because of the mineralogy. That is the original mineralogy of the soils, where the soils came from during soil formation. And they are normally attributed with leaching of bases and presence of aluminium, iron, and manganese oxides. When we look at why the acidic soils have a problem and why they are normally based in the Kenya Islands, is because they're associated with the leaching of base cations. And the base cations which are normally leached is because of too much rain. So when there is a lot of water available in the soil, the base cations like calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium, because they are soluble in nature, they normally leach down the soil profile. And what is normally left in the soils is what is called the resistant minerals. That is aluminium, iron, and manganese, and they are oxides and hydroxides. These resistant minerals, which is aluminium, iron, and manganese, they are the ones which increase the acidity because of also presence of iron. That means they take the pH scale down from 7 towards 0. Acidic soils are normally associated with high exchangeable aluminum percentages, high aluminum saturation, and this aluminum and iron, they are oxides and hydroxides, normally fix phosphorus, making phosphorus not available in the exchange complex. Phosphorus is very important because it's the second most important nutrient after nitrogen. Nitrogen is not normally fixed a lot in acidic soils, but it has a problem of being soluble in nature and being leached down the soil profile, whereas phosphorus is not leached down the profile by a lot of rains, but is normally fixed by aluminum and iron oxides and hydroxides in acidic soils. We know that nutrient dynamics within the exchange complex in the soil is determined by the pH. When the soils are acidic, they normally have very low pH levels, and when they have low pH levels is associated with high micronutrients and low base cations, and also low levels of phosphorus and nitrogen. In this study, we only concentrated on the phosphorus because phosphorus, as I mentioned earlier, is very important in determining emergence of plants, root development, and is also important in determining seed formation and fruit formation. And that's why it's the second most important nutrient after nitrogen. When we can ameliorate soil acidity by application of lime, tillage practices, organic matter, and also application of fertilizers. Liming has been known for many years to neutralize soil acidity, and it neutralizes soil acidity by reducing the hydrogen ions or exchanging them with the base cations, and also adding some base cations like calcium and magnesium in the soil. Once it neutralizes, it enables now the aluminum and iron ions to be able to release the phosphorus which they might have fixed to the exchange complex, hence enabling it to be able to be uptaken by plants. Though liming is good, when we lime, we normally just apply the lime on the top of the soil, just the top 0 to 10 centimeters. And research has shown that when you apply lime just on the top, it takes around 1.27 centimeters. It moves 1.27 centimeters deep in a whole year within a fine texture soil. That means once you spread your limey material on top of the soil, it will only move 1 centimeter the whole year down. And as we mentioned earlier, acidity is normally, most of it is because of the original mineralogy of the soil. That means then the acidity which is down where the roots will be is higher than what is in the top. And it also means that if it will only ameliorate the acidity of 1.5 centimeters on top, if the maize, like for example maize plant, it goes up to 30 centimeters, and also others goes up to 50 centimeters, and also others like in the western part of Kenya goes up to even 1 meter down. It means that the place where the root hairs will be, the acidity will not have been ameliorated properly. So this study, that's why this study came up, suggested to check if we do deep tillage. That means we spread the limey material, then now we do deep tillage. We mix the lime up to a level of maybe like 30 or 50 centimeters deep. Will it bring any change in the lime, on the acidity amelioration, and will it improve nutrient uptake better than when we spread on the surface? And so this study aimed at checking on the effects of tillage on maize crop phosphorus uptake, then maize growth and yield. Also check on the effects of lime and phosphorus fertilizers on phosphorus uptake, maize growth and yield, and also check on the interactive effect of tillage, lime and phosphorus fertilizer application on the same phosphorus uptake, maize growth and yield. The study was done in Waruyu Farm in Githunguri. This is an ATC farm which is found around Githunguri area in Kiambu County. And it was done for 3 seasons, 2 long rains and 1 short rain. The treatments were laid down in randomized complete block design and replicated 3 times. And we had 2 major treatments. One was tillage practices, and the other one was phosphorus fertilizer and lime treatments. So the tillage practices were put in the main plots, while the subplots had the P fertilizer and the lime treatments. The tillage practices that was used, we had the normal plowing of 0 to 15 centimeters. Then we had use of the hand oar, the jembes that we normally use in the village, the local technique that we use in the village. Then there was strip tillage, which was done by use of a modified hand oar, which was 15 by 30 centimeters. The fertilizer applications, there was DAP plus lime, TSP plus lime, TSP alone, lime alone, and Condro, which did not have anything. Then Duma maize variety was used in the experiment, and the primary material which was used was calcium oxide. Data which was collected during the experimentation, we started by doing initial soil sampling to know the status of the soil, and this was meant to inform the amount of lime that we are going to apply, and also the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that we are going to apply. Then at the end of the 3 seasons also, another soil sampling was done to check whether the soils have improved or not, and more specifically the phosphorus levels. When we planted the maize, we took some growth parameters, data on growth parameters, which includes plant height, interval, number of leaves, which was taken between weeks, the 2nd week after emergence to the 10th week. And finally, data on yield was taken by taking the dry matter weights and also the grain yield. Phosphorus uptake was also evaluated twice, 13 days after crop emergence, and also during tasseling. We took the blade opposite and below the crop, because that is the time when phosphorus content within the plant is normally highest. And all data was analyzed using GenStat software and mean separated using Duncan multiple range test. To have a synopsis of the data which was collected, we can see from my table that the soils were strongly acidic both in the long rains and the short rains, because they have a pH of less than 5. And the exchangeable aluminum level was also very high, which was higher than 2.0, which is the recommended. If it's higher than 2.0, lower than 2.0 is okay. If it's more than 2.0, is normally very high. And also the aluminum saturation was above 20%. You can see it was 35 and that's 7. Then the standard phosphorus requirement, that is the amount of phosphorus required by that soil, was also very high, because according to the data, the tabulation, we required 257 milligrams of phosphorus per kilogram soil, whereas the normal standard is normally 150. Looking at the growth parameters of the plants, it means, and again, when you look at the plots which were applied with DAP plus lime and TSP plus lime, supported taller plants compared to the other plots which were applied with phosphorus and difference. That means DAP was a little bit superior than TSP and lime. A similar situation occurred in when you look at the number of leaves, because the plants from DAP and TSP plus lime was shorter. They were shorter than the ones with the other treatments were shorter than the one with DAP lime and TSP lime. It also occurred that the number of leaves, when you count them, you find that these ones have more leaves, a little bit more leaves, which was significantly different than all the other treatments. But again, in lime, though DAP seemed to have higher, they were not significantly different, both in the short range and long range. And similar situation also occurred in maize interform. The internal interform also, DAP plus lime and plowing also was significantly different than all the others. There was also no difference between ant oil and strip. The way there was also no difference between lime and phosphorus alone. Okay, the same scenario also happened in pea uptake. The plants which had DAP lime and TSP lime also and plow. Also, when we measured the tissues, the P in the tissues was higher than for all the other treatments, both in the long range and the short range. And also similar situation happened in pea uptake. That when you look at the dry matter, because automatically DAP lime and TSP lime and plowing had higher plants, automatically the dry matter was higher compared to other treatments. And also yield, the plots with DAP lime and TSP lime produced higher grain yield than all the other treatments, and also the plowed plots produced higher yields, both in dry matter and grain matter, than the other treatments. In conclusion, we can say that application of DAP plus lime and TSP plus lime promoted higher maize growth, better maize growth, and phosphorus uptake, and also grain yield compared to application of lime alone and phosphorus alone. And also plowing significantly promoted greater maize growth, phosphorus uptake and yield compared to strip and use of ant oil. Combination of plowing and DAP plus lime or plowing and TSP plus lime significantly also increased maize